This is Only the Strong Survive, a podcast powered by Con Media, where we dive deep into the world of business, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Dan Kahn, and I'm honored to have you join us today. So, let's get ready to learn some survival skills together. Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Only the Strong Survive, powered by Con Media. We have an excellent guest today, Stephanie Stuckey, the chairman of Stuckey's, a beloved family-owned candy brand. And Stephanie has been reclaiming and rebuilding her family business and has also been doing some really cool stuff on LinkedIn and just a lot of different marketing things that I want to talk about. So Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. We know you're slammed and we really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, Dan, I'm just delighted that you asked me to join you. Thank you.
So to start off, I guess right out of the gate, I first heard you and your story like 4 or 5 years ago on the 21 Hats podcast and thought it was so interesting. And then I followed you on LinkedIn and you do an amazing job on that platform, kind of telling your story and talking about your brand. But for those of our listeners who don't know you, or maybe they've heard of your family brand or your company or your products, can you give us a little backstory on Stuckey's?
I'd be happy to. So quick journey in the Wayback Machine to 1937 during the Great Depression, when my grandfather founded Stuckey's as a roadside pecan stand. He was like a lot of entrepreneurs. He found a problem that people had and he decided he was going to be the one to solve it. At that time, there were no places to pull over when you were taking a road trip where you could fill up with gas and souvenirs and a quick hot meal and use a nice clean restroom. And so that's what he did. He created Stuckey's, and before there was TA or Love's or Buc-ee's, there was Stuckey's. We were the first roadside retail chain, and he also paired it with delicious pecan snacks and candies. We started with this little pecan roadside stand and grew it from there. So we had manufacturing, we had billboards, we had a distribution center, and we had almost 370 stores in 40 states on every major highway. But my grandfather sold the company, and it fell out of family hands in the mid-70s, and there were decades of outside ownership and frankly mismanagement. The brand lost its I was going to say it lost its logo. It lost its mojo. I need a pecan log roll for some energy right now. It lost its mojo and was on hard times. And 5 years ago, I had the unexpected opportunity to buy the then failing brand that was 6 figures in debt. And I did. I sunk my life savings. I'm an attorney by training and had a completely different career in public service and traded that all in for pecan log rolls and road tripping and reviving a nostalgic brand.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I do think that's interesting that your career path is very unusual. So, you started off in public service. Can you talk about that a little bit and kind of what you did and then how the transition sort of happened?
Well, I think like so many entrepreneurs, whether you actually pursue a career in public service or you're an entrepreneur, we all believe in building community and giving back. And that's always been a passion of mine. It's the thread that consistently runs through everything I've done in my career and in my personal life. So I started as a public defender. I did criminal defense work in Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia. I segued that into being a state representative, representing parts of Atlanta and DeKalb County for 14 years. And then I transitioned to environmental law. I ran an environmental nonprofit, and then I was head of sustainability for the city of Atlanta. So kind of a crazy journey, but the consistent thread throughout was really being passionate about helping others, either people who I think were trying to navigate the criminal justice system to representing a lot of minority causes in the Georgia legislature, and then being passionate about something I still care very deeply about, and that's our environment.
And during this kind of arc of public service that you were on, until the sort of opportunity presented itself, what was sort of the dialogue, both in your own head, but also with your family about this? 'Cause, I mean, you've got kind of a famous name, right? Like, I think most people know the Stuckey's name. They can visualize the logo in their head. I mean, since your grandfather sold it decades ago, what was the narrative at home or at Thanksgiving when you got together? Everybody was like, oh, we wish you never did that. Or was there an awareness of it? Did it never come up?
Well, it's a family business. I think anyone who's had a family business can relate to that. But we were almost like a B list, like celebrities are on the B list, or they don't get the red carpet, they get the back door. Our brand is known. It was definitely better known in the 1970s when we peaked. And having the last name Stuckey, absolutely. Probably every week I'd have a couple of people say, oh my God, gosh, pecan log rolls, right? That's you. That's your family. And so there was definitely an awareness, but it had also been sold. It was out of the family, and I was less involved and less engaged. I never thought, I would have the chance to run it.
Before you step back in, was the roadside kind of gas station, rest stop business and the candy brand, were they still kind of attached? Were they still one business?
It gets complicated, and I don't want to go down a whole rabbit hole. I don't want to be one of those people who say, read the book, but read the book. I did write a book, and I do go into the whole history of what was happening with the stores at the time when I bought the company, but very high level. The stores had dwindled from 368 to 40 franchise locations. Of those franchise locations, only 14 were original stores that people may associate if they remember stopping at Stuckey's in the 70s with the store design and architecture. The others were a model known as Stuckey's Express. It was a store within a store. It was a smaller concept. And basically, by that point, anyone who had a gas station on the side of the road with very little quality standards could say, oh, I want to be a Stuckey's, and slap our logo on the side of the store. It looked nothing like a Stuckey's. The brand quality had suffered so much, it was embarrassing to have our name on some of those stores. And we had been out of compliance with federal franchise laws for over a decade, and we were facing pretty hefty legal fees and fines for that. It was a mess. It's a good thing I'm a lawyer, but I'm not that kind of lawyer. So I had to retain franchise counsel to help me unravel that legal morass. Long story short, we transitioned those stores to licenses, and we debranded the ones that were super embarrassing. We still have some stores that we license. They pay us a modest monthly fee to use our name, and they buy product from us. When I bought the company, we also had a rented warehouse, and we were sourcing a lot of the product that you would see at the stores. Things like giant pencils or ashtrays shaped like toilets, or, I've got so much yeehaws and gizmos in my office. Okay. Snow globes, just back scratchers, all that stuff. We were selling that at very little margin because we were selling it, and then we had to pay our distribution center, and then the stores had to mark it up. So that's a really tough business unless you have a high volume, and 40 stores is not high enough volume, which is why we were in debt. And all the product that we had been making for decades, that had been my grandfather's signature product, was outsourced. And frankly, the brand really had lost what made it special and great. It took me a year to figure out how on earth I was going to reinvent that. And so I guess high level, what hopefully people can take away from this is not so much all the minutia of what I was dealing with, but just knowing anytime you buy a company, it's almost always a reason why a company is for sale. And it's usually because it needs some fixing, and you have to just unravel a bunch of stuff and figure out at its core, what can you make money at? What are you really good at? And what are you passionate about? And so it took us a couple of years to figure that out and then build a team. And now we own a manufacturing facility, and we make delicious pecan snacks and candies.
Well, I love that. When the opportunity presented itself, did you immediately say, hey, I have to jump on this, and this is a chance to kind of take this thing that is a part of my family legacy? Or was there like a big debate in your head? How did you approach that when you first kind of learned of the opportunity?
I think a bit of both. I absolutely was intrigued because I loved my grandfather and I loved what he did. And like so many people who are of a certain era, I'm a Gen Xer. So I grew up in the 70s, and I road tripped like everyone else. And we had the Woody station wagon, and we went to south of the border in Gatorland, and we would pull over at Stuckey's. And I remember what an amazing fun, just cornucopia of kitsch souvenirs and Americana and delicious candies, and how much fun it was. And so there was that part of me that just loved that experience and thought that's something special that's worth saving. That's a slice of Americana that we need to still have around. And so many of these really wonderful nostalgic brands, especially associated with road tripping, are gone. The Howard Johnson's restaurants, the last one closed 2 years ago, and the classic old Holiday Inns with the marquee signs, gone. There's still a few Shakey's pizzas, but not that many. So just a lot of these really fun places. And I thought, there's something there that's still magical that I think another generation needs to experience. But then there was a part of me that looked at the balance sheet and even though I didn't know a whole lot about finances, I knew that 6 figures in the red was not good. It took me about 6 weeks to make the decision and negotiate the price and the terms and consult financial experts, feel like I knew what I was doing. And the reality is I didn't.
Do any of us? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think being naive can sometimes be a superpower because you might not do some of these courageous, brave steps that change your life for the good if you fully understood what you were getting yourself into. So I'm kind of glad I wasn't fully aware, right?
That's human nature, right? We tend to forget the painful stuff so that we keep doing it and growing and learning, right? So,
right. That's how women have kids more than once. Like after 6 months, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I'll have another. You may not be able to relate to that, but I can relate to that. I have 2 kids.
I've observed at home, so I can, yeah.
Thank goodness we forget some of those painful things. It's worth it.
Absolutely. So you bought it. It's in debt. It's running in the red. And at that point, did you have this idea that like, I want to get into manufacturing, or did that come later?
No. Okay. And I think, in a way it's good because you really do have to get into it and talk to people and observe to get a plan. I think that's true of any strategy. If you're just looking at stuff on paper and you're like, oh, this is how I'm going to come up with my business plan, I'm just going to read reams of paper, you're not going to arrive at something that's going to be truly workable in reality. So it took me a year of we only had 8 employees, but I got to know them all pretty well. And I spent a lot of time. We had an office and we had a rented warehouse and we had a little staff. We had a little team and we had 2 sales reps, and I rode routes and I visited all the stores and I did some road trips, and I thought, well, how can we get this to work, and who are the partners I could use to rebuild this, and who would be interested in it? And that all took time.
It's interesting. I've started businesses and I've acquired one business, and in retrospect, the starting thing is hard for sure, but it's also very reliant on like your sweat equity. Like the more you put in, the more you get out, you learn lessons, you grow, you scale. What I didn't realize when I bought a business was if you buy something that's sort of broken, fixing a broken thing is way harder than starting from scratch, like way harder, because you have to figure out, you don't know what you don't know. And there's all this cultural stuff and broken stuff and weird relationship dynamics and like all these things that you don't know about until you're in it. And then you're like, oh my God. And you have all this extra layers of complexity because you have this very older business. It's got all this stuff that's attached to your family and multi-generational. And it sounds like maybe things had been sort of neglected for a while. So what is the process you use to dive in and say, okay, I've got this little team, I've got this thing, I bought this IP, I've got this distribution channel, I have to fix this. Like, how do you go about that? What was your approach?
I think it's important to bring in outsiders who you trust and respect to give that perspective as well, because sometimes you're so overwhelmed by it that it's hard to really see your way out. It was very helpful to me to find a business partner, and I've been so blessed to have my main business partner is a guy named R.G. Lamar, and he's now the CEO and I'm the chair, and we co-own the business. We do have 2 other smaller equity owners who are also very strategic and engaged in the running of the company. But finding that person who really helped come up with some new, fresh ideas while also understanding the inner workings, it was that dynamic. And I think the other thing that's really important, and I'd love to hear a little bit of your experience if it was similar, to really come out saying there's no sacred cows. Because if you start latching on to certain aspects of the business, like, oh my God, the stores are so critical to the business, this is a deal breaker if this is off the table, that we're going to focus on making product, we wouldn't have arrived at a solution that is working and has driven sales incrementally. So it takes a minute, but you really have to be willing to embrace change. And the corollary to embracing change is letting go, because you can't add stuff unless often you have to let go of what's not working. Did you see that? I mean, like buying an existing, it's like a house, right? Like contractors always say, like, we want to build a new house as opposed to restoring an old one. It's the same concept.
No, you nailed it. And I bought an outdoor recreation industry agency that I thought was a good sort of platform to build on. And we ended up having to basically strip it down to the studs and start over. I didn't know that going into it. But then the blessing I had was that, very similar to you, I found someone, her name is Beth Brennan, that came from that industry, who's really smart and super connected and very driven and has totally different skills than I have. And she came in and started she brought a totally different perspective to that company. And to your point, like at some point, we had all these goals and financial planning and business plans and all this stuff. And about a year in, we had to have kind of a come to Jesus conversation where it's like, okay, all this stuff that we've planned isn't happening on the timeline we thought it was going to happen on. So we need to sort of just let go and just do the best we can. And this thing is going to work out in its own time. I mean, it's something about the universe or whatever. As soon as we had that conversation, things started to happen. And they started to happen pretty quickly and in pretty great ways. So I don't know what it was. The bandwidth tube, there's only so much bandwidth of stuff you can do. So like, instead of trying to jam more stuff in there, let's just do one thing at a time, do it really, really well, and just trust the process, and it's going to work out. And it did. But boy, it was a tough year getting to that kind of like mindset,
100%. Like you have to focus. I think if you're big enough and you have a large enough team and you're well established, you got the infrastructure and the finances and the cash flow to support that, you could do a multi-layered company where my grandfather didn't start overnight with a full chain of stores and distribution and manufacturing and a billboard company. All of that was built incrementally. And so for me to jump in and say, oh, we're going to have all that again overnight, it's not doable. So we had to hone in and think, all right, what is the thing we can do really well, that we can afford, that we can drive? And let's, like you had to do, let's scuttle the other. And so we focused on, we're making delicious pecan snacks and candies. And actually, we're going to be refining that even more and focusing a lot on the pecan log roll. I mean, that's what we're known for. That's where we make our biggest margin. That's what has the highest volume sales. So narrow. And then in my opinion, keep narrowing, just keep refining, keep doing what you do really well, do more of it and do it better.
I love that. And I want to kind of get into that a little bit. And I'm very curious. You found RJ, you start kind of working on the business. And it sounds like, at some point you said, hey, look, we need to have more control over either manufacturing or supply chain. How did the whole factory thing come into play?
Came in together. By the way, his name's RG, and just think really great. That's what I tell people. He's really great, and he is. He's in the pecan business. He's a third generation pecan farmer. So like you did, you found someone who had expertise in that industry. So you understood the business side, creativity, strategy, a lot of the critical factors. But I think a really good partnership, like you also referenced, you balance each other's skill sets out too. And so Beth brings to the table that she had the skills in that industry and then also had the networking and the contacts. So I knew that we had started as a pecan snack and candy brand. And so that was a good way to think about how we might revive the brand. I like to say we're not living in the past, but we're definitely respecting it and learning from it. And there's some really solid lessons. My grandfather started this company as a roadside pecan stand. So that's where we're staking our little plot of the ground is we're a pecan snack and candy company. We happen to live in the part of the world where more pecans are grown than anywhere else. Georgia is ground zero.
Okay, so that's where pecans come from. That's interesting.
Well, there's like some 20 states, but a third of the global supply of pecans comes from the beautiful, wonderful state of Georgia, where I have lived and where I'm from my whole life. This is home. And so it's just, we are pecans. And so I got a partner who knew that world inside and out. He's chair of the Georgia Pecan Commission. So he knows, there's 200 varieties of pecans and they all have their own idiosyncrasies and RG can look at them and go, oh, that's an Elliott or that's a Shawnee or that's a Desirable and a Mammoth. And I have to really look at them to figure it out. And he brought those connections and he said, hey, I know about a manufacturing facility that's for sale. So that kind of stuff, certain stuff is publicly available, or maybe do a Google search and manufacturing facility for sale. But really, I think often these business opportunities that are super aligned with what we're doing, whatever your profession is, like that's through connections. That's through your network. That's because you live and breathe this industry day in and day out. And that's what my business partner does. He's like Mr. Pecan, And I'm saying it the way he says. I say pecan, and whenever I say it, ask, you're saying it wrong. So
okay, well, that was one of my questions.
Mr. Pecan.
Pecan. Yeah. Okay.
I say pecan, but since RG says pecan.
Well, it sounds like my last name, I'll call it pecan. I like it.
Yeah.
So this opportunity comes up and you buy this manufacturing facility. And was it like a white label deal? Was it making candy for like other brands?
Yes, they were mostly doing that. And they were also shelling pecans. And they did have their own in-house brand called the Orchards Gourmet. The company was called Atwell Pecans, and it's in a little town called Wrens, Georgia, outside of Augusta. Augusta.
I've been to Ren's. Okay, cool.
What?
And yeah,
It's
yeah.
we don't we I just checked the population for some nerdy reason today. We're at 2,919 people. We haven't even hit 3,000 population yet.
It must feel good as somebody who's worked as a civic leader for the state. Beyond the family name and everything else, it's got to feel good knowing that you're running a manufacturing and agriculture-based business in your state and supporting the local economy and stuff too. I mean, is that something that you think about? Because it's pretty neat.
It's what gives me energy. I mean, this is hard. Running a business is hard. It is exhausting. It drains your soul. It drains your mind. It drains your pocketbook and your bank account. And just knowing that you are part of something that is so much bigger than just making pecan log rolls, right? We are making jobs. We are part of a community. We now have 65 employees. I hope we can keep that number up year round. We are seasonal. Q4 is our biggest year. But I look at the employees and think, I'm just so happy to know that they work here and that they like it. Like, people like working here. I mean, every time you hire someone, it's a fit. And sometimes we have people that don't work out. But by and large, we have employees that are a team and they like it. We have families. We employ moms and daughters and cousins and siblings. And we have a couple of husband and wife teams. And knock on wood, that works out great so far.
Interesting.
It's a family environment. It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone. And it's just a lovely community.
Well, and one of the things I'd love to hear more about is we work with a lot of manufacturing companies, but they're mostly making hard goods, car parts or outdoor gear or tents or whatever. I have to imagine that manufacturing food, beyond the fact that it's probably regulated, I'm sure, by a bunch of different groups.
Yes, it's so regulated.
And it spoils, right? Like your raw materials, your finished goods, like you also have to worry about like things melting. And like, how did you learn all that? And how do you manage all that?
Hire really good people. Like, you align yourself with good, smart people who know this area, right? I mean, I know what I do well. I'm good at branding. I'm good at marketing, communicating, but there are other things I'm not as strong at. It doesn't mean I don't try to build my skill set and know what's going on, but I'm not a food scientist. And that gets to partnerships too. So we've trained internally because, as you might imagine, Ren's, Georgia isn't just full of a bunch of food scientists. This is a small community, but you hire people who have drive. You hire people who want to learn, and we can teach them. We've trained up people who keep our SQF food certification current. We did hire, I mean, most of the people we have working for us have learned through experience. I'd say, I don't know the percentage of college degrees of our 65 employees, but I would say it's less than 10. And we have quite a few who've gone to the local technical school, and then we train people. So we're figuring out, and then we use outside resources, especially the free ones, like the University of Georgia Food Innovation Center in Griffin, Georgia is an amazing resource. So public universities, amazing source of support. SBA, we've used their resources.
You can say that 5 more times, because that is something I've learned only fairly, like maybe in the last 5 years, is the power of partnering with a local public university is unbelievable. Some of our best employees have come out of partnerships where we're just going to those campuses. We're talking to the deans. We're talking to the department heads. We're saying, hey, get us your best people. Like, we'll hire them. Like, we need a pipeline. And they're excited because they want to give their people opportunities to work. And so it's a win-win, but nobody really talks about that very often. It's weird.
I mean, the tech schools are so supportive because these are people who want a job. I got a liberal arts education and it's great. I can speak French. I was a French major, but I wasn't getting out of college like, yes, here's the job. Graduates of tech school, they're focused. They want a job. And very often you get tech schools and smaller communities. These are people who want to stay in that community. They've chosen a tech school in that community for a reason. So Oconee, Fall Line Tech, and Augusta Tech are the two tech schools that we have sourced from, and both of their presidents have come and toured the facility. And, it is fun if you have, I'm sure car part factories are fun, and I love seeing how things are made, but it really is fun to see a candy plant.
A candy, that's got like an I Love Lucy thing going on. I like it. That sounds way more
We
fun.
have that equipment, by the way. The scene with Lucy and Ethel.
The assembly line and the chocolates
line,
and the whole do?
With the chocolate, that is an enrober machine, and the chocolate is coming out of the enrober, and then they're wrapping it by hand. We have that enrober machine. We have a flow wrapper now that manages the wrapping, but we have that exact machine. And it's really interesting. The technology hasn't changed a whole lot in candy making. We're still using the same types of copper kettles that my grandfather used. I look at those old photos of his candy plant. A lot of it is consistent. That scene in I Love Lucy, by the way, that was filmed at See's Candy, if you like See's.
Really?
That's
I
where
didn't know that.
They filmed it at the See's Candy plant.
That's cool. They're local to us-ish. So that's interesting.
Yeah, they're based in San Francisco.
Okay. I knew they're California based. So earlier, Stephanie, you mentioned that like marketing and communicating is kind of your passion. And I wanted to talk to you to shift gears for a second about LinkedIn. You do a really good job with LinkedIn, and it's so relatable. And it's like every time you post, I don't know what they call it, but I've got like little star things. So your stuff always comes up first in my feed. It's always good. You seem like a real human. Like half the stuff on LinkedIn these days feels like it was written by AI or something. Give me the kind of the rundown here. Was this like a strategy? Did you set out and say, I'm going to go conquer this platform?
Yeah, it was deliberate. There is a certain amount of, we do have creativity that is spontaneous, but no, this is strategic. This is thoughtful. I had a plan, and LinkedIn is the number one social media platform for businesses, and for me too, for our company, not me, for the team. We're mostly B2B. We are selling our product to other retailers. So we have to be on that platform interacting with potential customers. So it's just an incredible resource. I had help. One of our owners is a man named Ted Wright, and he runs a marketing firm called Fizz Marketing. And so he's really helped me with the strategy behind the post, putting together, like, there are three main things that I post about, right? I post about road trips, the fun and excitement of road trips, and I work into the road trip post. Oh, by the way, I'm taking a road trip to Raleigh, North Carolina. And while I'm there, I'm visiting Debbie's Hallmark. She has 5 locations, and every single one of them sells Stuckey's products. And you can also visit one of the 20 Food Lion stores in the area that has Stuckey's pecans on sale in aisle 2. I try to weave it in without it being too salesy, but listen, we're on the platform to promote our brand. So it's like when I was in politics and you called people to ask for money. Yes, you'd engage in some conversation and you want to connect with people, but you're also asking for money. So I post about road trips. I post about our team, and I tell the story about our team. So that's where you'll see stuff about how it's made, pecans, our product, our team. And then I also post about business, sort of business lessons learned. That's a little harder for me because I'm struggling myself. I'd love to say high five, we've made it. Stuckey's is at the pinnacle of success, but it's a journey. So I try to be authentic and realistic without being gloomy, because there are some days when you're like, oh my gosh, this is so hard and our finances are challenging and are we going to make payroll? And I'm having my 3 a.m. sweats about all sorts of anxieties. I try to be honest, but I also don't want to wallow in the challenges too much.
You're doing a good job though. And do you find that it flows? Because I've noticed that your strategy seems to be mostly on your page. There is a Stuckey's page. Obviously your last name is Stuckey, but does your work on your page create lift for the brand as well? Like, do you get comments when you walk in places and they're like, oh, I felt like, is that a thing that comes up?
Yes. I only have so much time every day. And so we have someone on our team who does the Stuckey's page, and we do cross pollinate, but people like to follow people, not brands as much. So I'm much more interested in, following Sarah Blakely than I am Spanx. I like hearing from her. I love her posts. And there's a myriad of examples like that, right? Richard Branson to me is much more interesting than Virgin or some of the 20 other brands he's founded. So I like the people aspect. So most people are following me. It's not so much me as the brand, because that's what I talk about. If you follow me, you're going to get a lot of Stuckey.
Yeah, but one of the things I kind of don't love about some of the other platforms like Instagram, and it's become more prevalent to me lately as my daughters are getting to the age where they're more aware of social media, is that it's so curated. Like you follow people on these pages and you look at a person's page and it looks like every experience they have in their life is at sunset on the beach in Malibu and everything is perfect and everyone is beautiful and everything is amazing. And that's like not real. And it's also setting all sorts of weird expectations. The kind of content on LinkedIn that I really resonate with, like yours, is like, yeah, like sometimes you're talking about challenges, but you seem like a real person. And since LinkedIn is a business platform, that's life in business, especially as an entrepreneur, is it's hard more often than it's not. So just be real about it. I like that a lot. What advice would you give to other business owners that say, hey, I really admire you, Stephanie, and I admire what you're doing. How do I use LinkedIn to grow my personal brand or my company? Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, follow people that you like, that you think kind of match your style, that can help inspire you, because I get inspiration from others. So I love following Sean with Dude Wipes or Trisha Walwork with Milo's Tea. Like I said, Sarah Blakely. So there's certain people I follow. So kind of learn. And I do the same with, I'm on Instagram and I'm on X and Facebook. And so I follow people who I think do really well on those platforms and try to mimic them in a way that's authentic to me, right? Sort of look at who you admire and get inspiration from them. And then hone in on what are your 3 points? Why are you on that platform? What is it you're trying to do? How can you accomplish that through doing 3 types of posts? And so you just kind of riff off those posts, and they all have to be related to your brand. The last piece of advice I will give is LinkedIn is about building community. So it's creating a conversation. So you're not just post and then leave it and see how many vanity likes you get. It's inviting dialogue. So draft the post in a way that you're inviting feedback. And yeah, you can put in there, what do you think? I want to hear your thoughts. Go ahead and ask people. I want your thoughts. Do that little downward point, leave in the comments. Tell me what you think. And then when people do tell you what they think, respond. It's a dialogue, right? And then people you admire, like, let's just throw out an example. I would love for Stuckey's to be in Cracker Barrel. Why aren't we in Cracker Barrel? They should be selling our pecan log rolls. So I'm borderline stalking the CEO of Cracker Barrel, and then I'm commenting on her post. Get out there and engage with the people you really want to get to meet. And it's not always just sending them a direct message. Maybe it's following their posts, getting to know who they are, getting to understand what they're about and their brand's about, because you read their posts and comment on their posts. And more, you're seeing CEOs of major brands who routinely post, and it really looks like they're posting their own stuff. I've talked to some of them, and they do post, not like I talk to Jamie Dimon or something, but I do talk to some of the smaller, like the candy CEOs, and they post their own stuff. You can get to engage with people.
I think that's great advice. And you're right. One of the other questions I had is I've noticed that you go to a lot of trade shows, and we're getting ready. We're going to a big trade show next week. And I used to sit on the board of a couple of trade shows, and I have heard so much chatter over the last, especially kind of post-COVID. I have heard people say that trade shows are the best thing ever, and thank God we can see each other face to face. I've heard people say trade shows don't need to exist anymore. We can all just meet on Zoom. What's your take on it? Because it seems like you do a lot of them, and I'm curious kind of what your take is in general, and also for your business specifically.
I think trade shows can work if you're very strategic about the trade shows you do, and then you set specific goals. What's your expectation? How many new customers are you going to get? Not just reorders from existing customers, because you can get those reorders by just giving them a phone call, right? Usually it's a personal outreach. So it's not just sales that you generate, which you should monitor. So we always have a trade show special. So what's your trade show special? What's your trade show goal for sales? And what's your trade show goal for new customer acquisition? And you monitor that. If you're not meeting those goals, then you have to reassess, is this trade show worth it? We recently dropped a trade show because we realized we were getting a lot of crossover between that trade show and another trade show. Actually, I like them both about the same as far as quality, but one cost us less. It's in Georgia. So we went with the trade show that's in Georgia, and the travel costs are lower for us. So, you have to look at that, because the bottom line is we're all trying to make money as a business. Yes, I want to create community and I want to make the world a better place, one pecan log roll at a time. But if I'm not paying our team and I'm not meeting payroll, I'm not succeeding in any business goal. You got to set those financial goals and you got to meet them. And if you're not, then you have to reassess whether trade shows are worth it. We think they're worth it. They produce results for us.
Me too, but that's really good advice. And I appreciate that.
I do have a tip real quickly is if you work through a distributor, trade shows can be very expensive. It's wonderful if you can afford a standalone booth. We cannot always do that. And we have found like the Ace Hardware Show and True Value Hardware Show, we went in with Midwest Distribution. So we went in with our distributor. So sometimes you can share cost if you go in with your distributor and work in their booth and you're offering samplings within their booth. So think of ways you could save money at a trade show.
And do the shows, are they typically okay with kind of co-op situation like that?
That's a very good question. Like the Sweets and Snack Expo, and I know that one the best since I'm on the board of the Confectioners Association. You're not supposed to share a booth with another brand. You pay for your own booth. A distributor at these trade shows, they'll have 15 brands in their booth. They'll always staff the booth, but it will be with the distribution team that's staffing the booth. And they're going to be representing all 15 brands or whatever the number is. But they'll often let you staff the booth too. And I'm just there to promote Stuckey's. I'm not going to be promoting any other snack food. It's always snacks at the Midwest booth. So I'm not going to be promoting any of the other snacks or candies. I'm here to promote Stuckey's. And you can get to the show. It's a lot more affordable. The other thing I do to save money with trade shows is whenever possible, a lot of times I'll have a call for speakers. I'll sign up to be a speaker and they will quite often cover your cost. They'll cover your travel and they'll cover your hotel if you're a speaker.
The thought leadership thing is a really powerful tool. I think that's a really great tip. And it also probably gets you in front of a lot of decision makers too.
Gets you in front of people. Now be very careful because I've spoken at Sweets and Snack and I've spoken at the National Convenience Store Association. You don't want to get up there and be an infomercial for your brand. That's disingenuous and it's almost like cheating, right? People are going to be like, screw them. You know, I came to learn about how to build a team, not how to buy more pecan log rolls. So don't get up there and talk about your brand. You're there to speak on whatever leadership topic you've signed up for. So be very aware of that. But with that caveat, I can't tell you how many trade shows I've gotten a free booth and all my expenses covered because I was a speaker. Now, that's only good for once because they mix up the speakers every year.
But it's also a good beta test, right? And if you go to that show and it produces tons of results, you'll probably want to pay to go back, right?
Absolutely. But it enables you to get that first year in. The other thing I've seen is it often will take being there for a couple of years to build up some brand recognition where retailers are going to want to stop by your booth and place an order. Oh, and also not every trade show is an order writing show. I mean, you've seen this. Some of them, the expectation is they'll write orders on the spot. Others, you're not going to get a single order at the show. They all come afterwards. So just knowing that lay of the land so you know what success looks like. Always go into that trade show knowing what does success look like.
Interesting. And how, since I assume the vast majority of your sales are through distribution, and I assume you're probably not selling direct to consumer a lot.
We do. I don't know what percentage, but a fair amount.
Okay, well, that's great. So you can obviously measure that fairly easily, right?
Yeah.
How do you measure success through distribution? Since a lot of times these are going to some sort of retailer, supermarket, roadside, whatever. How do you project that? How do you forecast it? How do you measure it? Like, how do you manage that side of the business?
I think you're reading my mind because I literally sent an email last night to our sales director because I'm trying to shift my role to focus more on actually moving product once it gets on the shelves. So doing less of the pitch and doing more of the, all right, we landed the deal. Let's get our sell-through rate up. I've got that challenge. How do we know if we're sending our product to this distributor, which retailers are going to? And that just varies case by case. We have one distributor that sends me a spreadsheet every month. Here are all your customers. Here's how much they've ordered. Here's the amount they bought, quantities, amount, location, and a spreadsheet. I just click a button. And then there's others like, oh, that's data you have to pay for. So I'm trying to get a handle around that. It's hard.
And you also have to have some level. So, because to your point, you're selling to the distributors. You're also trying to kind of through them, you're selling to these retailers because you need them to want your product on the shelf. But you also have to create the pull at the bottom of the funnel, right? Like when the consumer walks in and is standing at the aisle looking at this kind of rainbow of stuff.
Yes.
you want them to lock in on Stuckey's and say, I want the pecan log roll. How do you do that? Where do you see opportunity with marketing for the brand?
So I'm working on that. I've actually just put a strategy together. So I don't know, like, to be continued. I can tell you what my strategy involves is we don't have a big budget. So I'm going to focus on the Atlanta area, which is where I live. I'm going to focus on 10 locations, and I'm going to spend a year consistently going to those locations and doing pop-up events. You know, they can be tastings. They can be, hey, I want consumer feedback. Try this pecan flavor versus that pecan flavor and fill out the little survey. If the stores will allow me, I'd like to do some giveaways where I collect email addresses. Sometimes they're not going to be willing to share that. So I got to, but that's one of the ones I want to do is gather information. I also have a strategy where we've got a partner and we're going to start working at some farmers markets. They're going to sell our product at their booth. It's a produce booth that also sells peaches. So they're going to sell peaches and now Stuckey's pecans. We're finalizing the pricing on that. So that looks like that's going to be a go. Once I officially have that confirmed, I'll do a little post about who our partner is, but I'm excited that that's in the works. So we're going to just spend a year just consistently trying to promote the product in a small area that we can kind of control to see what sort of movement we get. So we'll get some baseline data and then we'll see, all right, how are we moving product month to month? Is this yielding results? Obviously, the other way to get product moved is to put it on sale and to promote it. But if you have a small budget and you're trying to put something on sale with a large grocery chain where your margins are super tight to begin with, that gets really hard and you can't afford an end cap and you can't afford placement at the point of sale for the impulse section. The other thing, and I would love it. Anyone who has some ideas, hit me up on LinkedIn and give me some pointers. Like I'm trying to figure this out too. But one of the other things I'm working on is a product locator guide that's more user friendly on our website, because right now we really don't have one. It just lists the Stuckey store locations and one small convenience store chain is on there. That's it. And I mean, we're in like several thousand doors and we've got like 60 locations listed on our product locator guide. Like it's incredibly flawed. That's something I'm working on. I know I've got a meeting right after we tape this. We've got an IT person and I've got a proposed solution with a platform that I've seen some small CPG brands have. So if anyone has some thoughts on a product locator guide that's user-friendly, that's not super expensive, that's compatible with Squarespace and WooCommerce, let me know.
So one of the things I was going to ask about is I know since you do some D2C, one of the things that we're seeing a lot of right now, and we don't work in food, but it's something I've been targeted with and participated in as a consumer, as I'm seeing more and more brands doing D2C digital marketing through social, where you see some sort of a compelling piece of content and it says, hey, like there's this brand that it's like a beef jerky brand that keeps targeting me. I don't know why. And I keep seeing their stuff and it keeps popping up. And finally, just kind of honestly, like out of nothing other than just sort of like giving up, I'm like, you know what, fine, I'll try your product. And like, you never leave the Instagram ecosystem. So you see the ad and you hit the thing and you go, oh, okay, I'll try it. And then it's tied into Apple Pay. So like I'm still in Instagram and I just right click the little button on the side of my phone and I spend the $30 and they send me a case of beef jerky and it was fine. Like it wasn't great. In this case, I've had other products I've gotten on there that are really good, but it's such a frictionless experience that they targeted me for some reason that it's just like boom and it shows up on your doorstep and it's kind of the Amazonification of everything. Two-part question is, have you tried that kind of digital marketing? And then is that a way to get people aware of the brand, even if they don't double click the button on the phone? At least they then have it like in their head that this brand exists and maybe they see it on the store shelf.
No and yes. We have not tried it and I would love to do it. It's just we have limited capacity, but I absolutely feel like we're missing out by not doing that, especially meeting the consumer where they are. We have to appeal to a younger demographic, and the younger demographic is buying product on Instagram. I can't tell you how many times, I mean, this is totally anecdotal, but I'll see a cute outfit on a young woman and I'll say, oh my gosh, I love your pants or your shoes or whatever. They always say, got it on Instagram. That's where they do their shopping. My daughter's 19, my son's 22. They shop on Instagram.
Well, I think something that you have going for you that's really cool is what I'm seeing with Gen Z and maybe to some degree with Gen Alpha after them is authenticity and storytelling has become much more important versus like the millennials, which are more like value focused and stuff. So it's like the fact that you have this sort of heritage brand. It's nostalgic. It's got a great story behind it. It's not some random thing from Temu that just shows up one day. Like there is a great kind of connective story there. It might be really impactful.
So I'm going to work on that. You've given me something on my to-do list. So maybe message me afterwards, the beef jerky. I'm just curious. There's any number of them. I have yet to actually purchase something on Instagram. I have given them a heart. That's about it.
My wife is irritated because I buy a lot of stuff because I'm also a marketer, right? So when I see something, I'm like, oh, I'm going to try that. And half the time it's technical. Like I want to see what their funnel looks like. Half the time I actually want to try the product. And
you're like, honey, it's market research.
Right. I'm like, stop getting all this crap sent to our house. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm interested. There's some really, even like, you talked about Dude Wipes earlier on LinkedIn, and like they've done a good job with that. And like, there's a soap brand called Dr. Squatch that has like these really funny ads on Instagram. And once you're in the funnel, you're in the funnel. And the one that to me is the originator of this whole thing was the razor brand. It was before Harry's. I can't remember it now, but see, maybe they're not so good because I forgot their name. But,
all right. If you remember, message it to me.
I'll message it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm trying to learn that space. That 100%. We Team Stuckies, we need to be doing this. So.
Oh, Dollar Shave Club. That was the first one that I just remembered.
All right. I got to get the product locator guide first. So let me I got to check that one off the list. And then Instagram shop. We're on Walmart.com, which has been kind of a fun experience. And then we're going to get on Amazon next. We've been on Amazon. Now we're off. Lots to do, but it's exciting.
So I know you're tight on time and you've been very generous with us. I kind of wanted to wrap things up with a question I ask everyone on the show to give you a frame of reference. My kind of life experience is I'm kind of a school of hard knocks guy. Every major lesson I've learned in business, I've learned by kind of screwing something up and then trying to reverse engineer, okay, what did I do here? And how do I not repeat that mistake? The question I wanted to ask you is, as you think about your arc of your career and particularly your time at Stuckey's, what's the biggest mistake you made and what did you learn from it?
Probably just taking so long to figure out what it is that we're going to do. Because it really took me 2 years to get to that. And all the while, it's spending money and resources and not really honing in. So I wish I'd gotten strategic faster and really honed down like simple. When you think you've got what you want and you figured out your strategy, simplify it even more. And then simplify it even more. Like just keep going an extra step to make it smaller and smaller and smaller and more focused. And then you can always, once you get that really super focused part right, you can build up again. Get your core, why you do this, what you're best at, what you do really well and profitably and you're passionate about. Get that down and do that a lot and get profitable and build up cash flow and then build. I wish I'd done that. Cash is king.
I didn't get that memo. It took me about a decade to figure that part out. So great advice. Stephanie, tell us about your book. Tell us where they can follow you. Tell us where they can find more about Stuckey's.
Yeah, the book's called Unstuck, Revival of a Nostalgic Brand. You can get it on Amazon. I just got my first royalty check. Woo woo. Sold about, I think they said 2,600 copies. I had no clue if that's a decent amount, but my publisher's happy. So I'm happy if my publisher's happy. We're plugging away with that. That's also for sale on Stuckeys.com. If you buy it on our website, you get it autographed. You can put in the notes, I'd love for Stephanie to sign it. And when I come down to our candy plan, I'll put a little note in there for you. And then just follow me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. My handle is @StuckeyStop. And then message me on LinkedIn. I respond to messages on LinkedIn.
That's how we got you on the show today.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that. Thank you for responding.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking me.
Well, Stephanie Stuckey, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of Only the Strong Survive. Big thanks to Stephanie Stuckey for joining us. If you found this episode interesting, please make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with your friends. Until next time, thanks for joining us.